Terrific. Thank you all very much. So for me, priority is, of course, on students with every effort that we do at Art Center. And as you know, we work very hard. We have tremendous faculty that are supported. They have been very supportive through all the different car studios that are in Southern California or Northern California. And that's been a unique advantage of Art Center, just having working professionals teaching the principles and the processes and best practices in automotive design to our students. So they're getting a lot of exposure to doing that work as well as possible, right? So sketching, drawing, rendering, making models, designing, everything to do with the craft of actually being a car design professional. But what they get less exposure of, unless they get some experiences and internships, but even then, what remains a mystery to them until later on in their career is the role and responsibility of a designer or a design department within a company, within the industry, right? So if you could maybe speak a little bit about, you know, how does that relationship among different disciplines work? What's the role of the design department? What's the contribution? And how do you see that? Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's interesting because, as you said, there's not a course on this per se, and I think as design, especially in transportation, kind of evolves in the degree of importance within a corporation, if you think about it, there's very few places in a car company that represent this kind of condensed point where all the core disciplines can come together. You know, finance, marketing, product planning, engineering, design, branding. You know, that's, to me, that's design in a nutshell. You know, and if you can be somewhat versed across a range of disciplines, what I've found is you end up being this almost cheerleader for the brand, you know, and because you understand and you speak the language that marketing understands, you understand and speak the language that engineering understands and branding understands, and you're really close to the consumer. And you know, the engineering department, they don't have all of that ability, knowledge. The marketing department, certainly not. And the finance guys, that's a whole different story. So I think that's where the opportunity lies. To become a great designer, yes, that's super important, but you can't do great design without all these other disciplines working in concert together. And I think that's hard to understand when you're a student. I didn't understand that. I didn't want to have anything to do with marketing and engineering, you know. You're just thinking about doing great design and making great sketches. But you realize going along that without those other disciplines, like believing in what you're doing, they're not going to come along for the ride. And that requires you to be really empathetic to their world. You know, you really gotta understand what the challenges are from the engineering side, what the challenges are from the cost side. If you can address those things head on with your creativity and your vision, truly help with the problem solving side of quote unquote car styling, you know, that's when it really becomes real. And I think imparting this to young designers, I think is, well, it's part of your challenge, it's part of our challenge as an industry.
Thank you.
I think one of my interns is actually sitting in the back. But I would say if you asked any intern who joined our company, like their biggest surprise is how much actual product planning, marketing, communication, engineering we actually do within our company. It's really interesting. I think probably when Art Center was founded, it really was styling. It was stylists. But I would say right now, if I had to describe my designer's role, is you're a futurist, conceptual thinker, business planner, packaging engineer, designer, and then maybe a stylist at the very bottom. And I think that's the biggest change. And Sometimes that's a really great result of design having more power now than ever before. If I think about when I joined Toyota, it was very much, we make this car, the next one is this, engineering's already decided this, wrap it. And in our current era, like the Land Cruiser that's out there, the new one, and the new Prius, those are creations of design first. So we've turned into a design first company, and we propose stuff, and my boss in Japan, basically it's a direct decision to the president and the chairman, and then product planning supports, which has been really great. But that responsibility means we can't just style stuff. We have to think deeply about what we're making and why, who is it for, who's the target buyer. And for me, it's really exciting. I love being a designer in this era. So I know you're going to touch on it later, not just how techniques and technology is changing, but with everything basically is good now. Quality is, everything's basically good. So then the creation story, the design story, what it represents to the customer has so much more meaning. And so I'm actually jealous of intern and new designers because they have so much more power to create something now than I did when I started. So to your point, I think the tools you need to have is you have to have a basic understanding of the business and be aware of the current industry trends and world that we're in and where it's going. But also, I think communication, the basic skills of communicating and selling your idea is so crucial now because you have to pitch why your proposal is the correct one and why should they invest, $200 million in your idea. So to me, that's been the really huge change, actually.
Great, thank you, Ian. Nadya, any thoughts?
Yeah, from my perspective, I would say overall it's changed a lot over the years. I remember, starting at BMW, we didn't have the exposure to marketing or, product planning as much as we do now. It was more so an engineering exchange as a priority. What's been very different for me, I've worked for a lot of startups up until now, and it's almost this whole description that you two gave of you have to collaborate, you have to be very proactive, you have to see everyone's side in this business. But working for a startup, it's even more intense. And you're almost in a pressure cooker, not in a bad way, but you get infiltrated with all this information from all the other departments. And the collaboration is so important that I think that is something, if you're having the path in the future to go into automotive design, that's the major difference between a startup and an OEM that's been around for a while. Although OEMs have modified their practices a little bit too, but I think startups definitely add a different twist to that whole collaboration and exchange of knowledge between departments.
Wonderful, thank you. Dan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think maybe you guys said it the best. But in general, I mean, yeah, what Derek said is very right. If you think of a pizza and you have the little table thing in the middle, that's kind of the design department. Everything is flowing through it at some point. At some point, everything that we create that's three-dimensional has to have a skin or an avatar, is what we call it, or a digital avatar. So the reality is that, yes, I love what you said. Empathy is the #1 thing. It's when you're talking to marketing and communication, when you're talking with package engineers or even the board of directors, I mean, you have to understand what the intention is holistically. And then if you have a different idea or your team does, how do you bring it to the table gently, and also being empathetic to everyone else's vision forward? Because at the end of the day, we're designing for all of us, for other humans, and we need to understand each other.
Wonderful, thank you. So to stay on this whole leadership topic of the designers, so like I mentioned, I would really like to kind of get some insight from all of you, because you're in these leadership positions. If you can share maybe a little bit about Who inspired you on your journey? If there was a mentor that was particularly significant? And then most importantly, I'm really curious about this. If you can share, like I was saying in our pre-conversation, in our industry, most of the people that get into these leadership positions get thrown into them without any formal training. There are exceptions. You know, some companies will send you on something as far as an MBA, but most of the time you just get handed this job of management and responsibility without any training, right? So you just have to figure it out on the go. So for all of you, if you can share anything that you wish somebody told you before you took on one of those roles.
I guess I'll go. So I was fortunate. I did an internship. This would have been in 1992 at the Volkswagen Design Center, California, which was in Simi Valley. And when I interned there, it was a joint studio between Volkswagen and Audi, and there were two gentlemen on the Audi side, Jay Mays, formerly of Ford Design and Audi Design, and Freeman Thomas of Audi TT and Myers-Manx and all of that. And those two guys, they taught me so much about the kind of design and brand. At the time, the brand word was not being thrown around as much. But they were working on a project for a new Volkswagen Beetle. And it had started in that studio. And if you know Freeman Thomas, he's like obsessed with that kind of era of European products. And they weren't just working on a new design. They were absolutely obsessed on every level about telling the story of why we needed a new Beetle and what the history was and the nostalgic component. And obviously, most people know that story really well, especially in the US, because it was such a culturally relevant thing. But the way they went through the details and really crafted the storytelling behind this, at the time they were doing like a slideshow with slides. And they took this slideshow and they made brochures and they brought all the models and everything to Wolfsburg to present it to the management. And it was so compelling and so emotional and so like, how can we not do this? And the whole thing was written out, and basically that got approved. They did a show car, and then they did the production car. But I watched Jay and Freeman do that throughout their career. On everything they worked on had a compelling story. And that's when I realized that was the cheerleader component. That was the tool that design had. Besides just styling and making cool models, it was the tool that design had to tell that story and to take the passion that they had, and those are two really passionate guys, and get everybody else, get the finance people, the marketing people, the engineering people, the leadership at the highest level, all pumped up to do something, came from that storytelling capability. And to me, that is design and brand, you know, and it's a powerful, powerful thing.
Yeah, that's a great story. Anything you wish somebody told you?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, careful what you wish for sure. But yeah, I mean, I'm super lucky. I've had the right mentors that you know, I wish those things, I think when they were doing that, I don't think they were telling me that. They were kind of, I feel like they were creating that real time. And Jay was really at the forefront of kind of design from a design standpoint, and then communicating that at the highest level. He was a real pioneer in that regard. So he was playing a much, much, much bigger role than just the head of the design department. And I think he never articulated that. He was just doing it. I wish it was explained to me, because I think it didn't fully, I think I was mimicking that in early days and didn't know exactly why. And I think that later on it was like, okay, that's what they were doing, you know, and I wish it was explained better. And that's the opportunity, obviously, here to explain to students why this is so important, because you can empower not only yourself, but the whole organization with your tools, with your passion, with your words, with your actions. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful, actually. Just to kind of riff on that a little bit, I usually, try to help my clients understand how important of a role design can play within the company to inspire, to be a place of vision. Because we are the ones with the gift of that visual storytelling. They might have in their head, they might have on a spreadsheet, but they cannot really see it visualized. So I always think, design needs to be that place where everybody's just can't wait to go and see what they have for that vision.
I think also what you'll find is, although it's not the entire department, but you'll find there are individuals in the other disciplines that are easily infected with your passion.
Right.
They exist in the marketing group, believe it or not.
Right.
And they exist in the engineering group, and they exist in the planning team. And if you can get them on board early on, then they infect their team. And you know what I mean? And it kind of goes, it snowballs from there.
That's how culture grows. Yeah. Ian?
Well, Derek hit the nail on the head. I think the storytelling and selling your concept is so key to what we do. I wish there was more of that as a student. You talked about mentors. I'm actually really lucky. Two of my earliest mentors at Calty are sitting in this room. Dennis over there, and then Erwin over there. And he's all embarrassed now. But one thing, what they taught me was, and I have to give credit to them, that they allowed a 24, 25-year-old designer have so much responsibility to create the story, push me to do story and design as a full content creation to pitch. And when I think back on it, that's a pretty great opportunity they gave me. And I think, talking about the selling thing, I was selling furniture before I started Art Center. And so I was the most introverted person in the world in high school. It's kind of why I chose art. Like, I could hide in the back of the art room and draw cars all day and be left alone. And I hated public. I mean, now I love this. So don't give me the mic. I could go on forever. But selling furniture taught me how to, hey, you really want this chaise lounge. It's going to look perfect in your house because A, B, and C, and believe me, blah, 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 blah. And that's a lesson I learned early, which I'm very grateful for. You asked about leadership. A lot of times there's this myth that people who make it to leadership miss the drawing and sketching. And I do, and I still do it every so often. But the thing that I learned that I actually love is inspiring my team. And I would break down what I learned and what's good for leadership in 5 things. The first one is to, I believe in clear communicating, like communicating the goals, what we want to do, where we want to go, and why, and what we're looking for. Second thing is trusting your design team to create the great ideas themselves, and don't be so overbearing. I think third role for a good leader is to build up the future generation of designers. I think that's really our key role, is to basically foster our replacements to make sure that the design continues to be groundbreaking and new. And that's a part of the role I really love. Fourth is learning that everybody's an individual. I think in my previous role, when I trained my managers or gave them advice on how to lead, don't paint everybody with the same brush. You have to know your employees, your team members, and each person something different makes them tick or gets them inspired. And so you have to understand how everybody on your team works and what they believe, and you kind of nuance your advice to each different person. I think that takes time to learn. And then finally, I believe in leading with a positive attitude, because design is tough. That you work on something, it can be canceled the next day. We just went through this, and the young team members are heartbroken. But I'm like, hey, this happens, but we have another chance to do something tomorrow, and let's stay positive, and those type of things. So for me, those are things that you don't really learn in a design class, but you learn along the way, and it's part of the journey. So.
Beautiful, thank you. Nadya, any thoughts?
Well, it's actually the most important thing to me is to have a mentor when you go through your first jobs and really are learning the ropes of it in real time after school. I was fortunate enough to have Mike Ninich, the head of interior design back at BMW, when I got started. And what I loved about the experience with him was that he was very hands-on. He would take the time to really, introduce you to what he's expecting of you, show you how it's done, hands-on, and that was something that I thought was very unique because it really makes you feel like he puts his trust in you to really do good design. And I think that is something that's very, very important as a leader. You have to make sure you people know that you trust them in what they do, what decisions they make. The second strong influence I think you and I both had was from Chris Bangle, fantastic motivator. I mean, his speeches, the way he would explain things, the way he would criticize designs, it wasn't just, oh, that's not gonna fly. It was to every detail he would explain to you why that is not gonna go forward. And so those are things to me that really stuck with me. And I also always try with my team, definitely, to give them the freedom to be their own designer. Granted, we work for a certain brand, granted, there are certain rules in there, but I think overall, every designer has to find their own way. Every designer has to, develop their skills at their own pace and walk their own direction. Still within the overall goal, but I think that is, to me, the one thing I really make sure everybody gets the opportunity to be their own designer, because I would want the same, and I was fortunate enough to get the same. And there's nothing worse in the world than micromanaging. So that would be my experience.
Amen to that. Both of you mentioned trust, and I find that it does two things. One, it inspire you in two ways, right? It inspires you to be yourself because you recognize you have the trust to be what you want to deliver, what you want to contribute to it, right? But it also inspires the responsibility to do it right, because I remember in particular instance, difference between a project on which everybody was working on, right? And how different the results were. If you had a project where there were 12 designers and 12 full-size models. We've had a project where we had 12 full-size models for board of directors to choose, right? And then a different project, we had 3 designers given a responsibility for the next production car, right? And the weight of going like, wait a minute, I really have a shot at having, I am being tasked with designing this car, right? The level of responsibility inside you rose as well, given that trust. So
Absolutely.
I think it's really important. Like in every human endeavor, right? Trust is everything. Yeah. Thank you. Daniel.
Yes. So I feel regarding mentorships in school, it was in the very beginning. I think when you're new to the industry, you don't really know who to ask. So inadvertently, a lot of your classmates are kind of your mentor. Luckily, I think at that time I was quite young. I was 17, and a lot of my classmates were maybe a bit more older, and they were able to just give me life, lessons before maybe I ever experienced them. I was very grateful for that. But going into the higher education, I think there was a lot of instructors like Ian, honestly, that inspired a lot of us, because he is leading a studio, driving all the way to Pasadena, still has the energy to amp us up. We would contact him via Facebook Messenger, all this stuff, like just spam his inbox, like, hey, Ian, what do you think of this, and that? And honestly, give us really honest feedback. And we didn't get that a lot, to be honest, at that time. And fast forwarding into the professional career, I think right now, my boss, Ken Lee, and then Alfonso, I always call Ken Uncle Ken, because there's sometimes he'll call me on the side and go, just take a breath and just breathe. Because at the same time, just being a bit younger, and you don't want to be impulsive. You want to, I think that was the one thing that I wish someone maybe said is kind of, yeah, just take a moment, digest it, run it through your head 3 times, and then spit it out. And then I think the second best thing is that I wish someone taught me Excel. Like 2 years ago, a year ago when I assumed this position, finance just gave me all this stuff, and I'm like, does this come in a Photoshop template? And so that part is quite interesting, but that's I see numbers now as kind of design. No, you're designing numbers to fit this streamlined thing, hit within this tolerance, minus or plus 10%. Withstanding that threshold. So realistically, I think mentorship is it could be very diverse in many different disciplines.
Beautiful, thank you. All right, let's shift gear now to future, right? What emerging trends do you see as poised to make a significant impact on the automotive design industry, right? I mean, we have a few that, might be the obvious ones, like the AI, use of AI, VR, how does that impact your teams? But also, is there anything related to, consumer preferences, business models, other advanced technologies, sustainable materials, anything of the sort?
I have a big one.
Go for it.
Sustainability. Huge, huge step in a different direction of how we used to design. And it really requires you to rethink how parts come together, what they're made of, how they come apart at the end of life. I mean, there's so many more aspects now to consider when you're designing. Exterior, interior, doesn't really matter, even color, material. Every element is now so important as a whole product or a part in a whole product that you need to consider why are you making it? How do you want to put it together? How long does it have to be around? How is the human interacting with it? Is it still attractive or not? So there's so many more factors that I think we never had to deal with beforehand, and now this is pretty much the #1 spot to include in your design thinking and the overall execution.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Component is massive, and I think a lot of the things that achieve sustainability effectively also can have a beneficial cost component. And I think it's just now kind of getting to that point where I think in the past where like using recycled materials or recyclable materials had additional cost associated with it. That's finally kind of hitting a tipping point now. The other big thing that I think is part of that is cost in general, because what we're seeing coming out of China and the level of product they're able to do at a cost, I think is gonna really set off a massive kind of value war. And I think that's gonna have a huge impact on design. And design's ability to design at a price is gonna become bigger than ever. And I know it's always been a difficult thing as long as I've been a working professional. Cost has been a challenge, but I think it's going to go into hyper overdrive. I really do. And I think that's where, as designers, we can sit down and say, this door panel is 13 parts. Does it really need to be 13 parts? Or is there some aesthetic or some material or something that I could actually make it look even cooler out of 3 parts? That's a sustainable story. Exactly. That's a cost story, and you see some of the efforts going into kind of giga castings and things like that, I think we're at the absolute beginning of this kind of cost industrial age push. And I think when I think of North America and Europe and what's happening in China, it's going to be thrust upon us whether we like it or not. So we better find innovative, clever ways to address it.
That's a great point, too.
Actually, both your guys' points are totally spot on. So sustainability is now just core. That's just baseline. Now, like 4 or 5 years ago, it was kind of a trendy word. Oh, the seat is this or the door. And now it's just assumed. So now we're in a role of how do we make it look good or make it look palatable or desirable for middle-of-the-road customers that don't care about sustainability. So that's an interesting thing, costing, totally. I think we'd be lying if we weren't all concerned about that. So if I had to say something different, the other two things I would add is it's mobility 3.0. So in the future, probably more and more, how does the automobile, your car, connect to a larger ecosystem of travel opportunities or connected devices, or maybe a brand becomes an ecosystem rather than just a brand that makes a certain type of thing. And I think more and more you're going to start to see that. You already seen it in Chinese brands, the way the phone companies are connected to the car companies and so on and so on. So I think you'll see more of that. And then just related to that, I think an interesting thing moving forward is also still the AI-based UX UI is happening. We're all working on that, and that really is the future as well. But with that becomes, one of the challenges we have is when you have a global company, the cultural differences on how you interact comfortably with AI or UX UI, and they're actually quite different between China market, American market, European market, and it's a challenge for the companies, like which direction do you go in, or when something has cultural relevance in one way, but another market sees something completely different, for example, privacy, or those things. So it comes back to my stylist comment from the beginning. In the old days, what does it look like? End of story. And now you have to think about all these technical and cultural and business issues that probably didn't have to think about 30, 40 years ago. And that's where we're heading. And then we don't even need to talk about electrification and all that stuff, because obviously, we're doing it. So it's what's the next technology and how does it fit regionally?
Great, thank you, Dan.
Yeah, and another interesting point is I think also the generational expectation of what sustainability is, or upcycling. Just doing a couple reports on like even just Generation Alpha. I think this is the generation that is being born in right now, the generation that is used to this kind of black mirror in some sense of being kind of a unique instrument to their daily process. And I think also to what Ian hit is, what is the ecosystem? I think sustainably, we have to start thinking about the vehicle or the product in general is assuming a lot of responsibility. It's very multifunctional. These products are becoming almost a Swiss Army knife in some sense, or could it just do one thing very well? I think that's also something. We're looking, I think there's also there's that technological advancement, but there's also a yearn to go a bit more analog, to feel stuff, to touch stuff. It's interesting because a lot of consumer feedback too is the haptic stuff is nice, but I really like that dial. I like that clicking noise. So there is something to it, and I think also why not upcycle some previous parts? I think a lot of our brands have an amazing heritage and a lineage of product. What if you were to bring the R32 GTR, knob and put it in the R36 or something like that? I think there's a lot of interesting things that we can do.
Yeah, he brought up a great point about the analog thing. I think that's huge, actually. I reflect, I'm obviously an 80s child, and I think, always reflected back on the 80s when cars became a lot of mainstream cars became very appliance-like, things got really reliable, things got really service-oriented, easier to use, but there was also a lot of products that kind of lost a lot of soul. But following that kind of push towards mass ease of use and reliability, then we had kind of the nostalgic wave that came in the late 80s and early 90s, which again brought a lot of the automotive romance back into cars. I'm talking about things like the Mazda Miata and stuff. That was transformative to bring a big push towards performance and things and more expressive design. really kicked off heavily in the early 90s. And I feel like we're at that phase again where the last 10 years has been so much about electrification, about the digitization of the automobile. And you can already feel like there's this desire to get like, to still have the machine, to still have this analog, whether or not it's internal combustion or gas. I feel like that's inevitable. And if you look at anytime there's big technological change in anything, there's always this like rush towards it, and then there's like a course correction that happens. And I think we're in it right now as we speak.
I think you're right. I think it kind of opens up an opportunity exactly the way it did in the previous generation for that emotional touch point to the customer, right? Where people can get passionate about the car again, rather than just the rational side of it. It's that balance of passionate and rational that's always swinging one way or the other, right?
I think, you said soul. I think putting soul back into the vehicles when everything becomes so much about tech is why design has so much power. Because, the design team is the one that's going to push that and do that. So, yeah, really interesting.
Great. So I did promise the audience would take some questions, and we've only covered about half of mine. So it took a lot longer than I thought, but very good discussion. Thank you all so much. So we'll take the opportunity now to maybe take one or two questions. Sorry, we're a little bit late. Take care. So, gentleman up front. Be a good Ian question.
Well, yeah, well, Toyota is a big hydrogen proponent, so probably that question is targeted right towards me. It's the Mirai is really an excellent car. The lack of infrastructure, no doubt, is the biggest problem with fuel cell vehicles, and the fact that Shell pulled out and there aren't that many stations is not a great thing. So I think our company's viewpoint, and this is where designers are cheerleaders. Yeah, luckily she's out there somewhere.
You got to get this cleared.
Well, there's a lot of different ways to get to carbon neutrality. So we make hybrids, we make plug-in hybrids, we make hydrogen combustion engines, we make hydrogen fuel cells, we make BEVs. We have great BEV technology that's coming. Fuel cells, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. I can't really get into it, but there are ways to make it portable, or a lot of companies are coming under the realization that maybe the hydrogen fuel cell is better suited for different applications, like heavy-duty transportation, cargo, building power generation, boats. So I think a lot of companies that invested heavily in fuel cell technology are spreading that technology to where it can help a clean energy ecosystem. So it's part of a infrastructure that's not the infrastructure. It's a supporting element. We're looking for ways to get hydrogen from green sources, because there's a lot of different ways you can make hydrogen fuel. But it's a part of the future. It's not the only solution for the future. I think we're really well aware of that. But it's a challenge. We have some really cool H2 concepts. Again, because we're advanced design, I tell you, my designers are futurists, so we have some pretty wacky, crazy ideas for the future. But you need to start there in order to give engineering team the exciting vision to achieve something. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
I think I still have a job.
Oh, I think Laura's got a question up here.
Hi, Laura Burstein. So Marek, you touched on a couple of your questions, which are topics that Derek and Ian and some of us have talked about before, and that is that Design school doesn't always equip you to be a good leader. And so in that vein, what I would want to know from you, since we're here to celebrate Art Center and the Transportation Design Program, how is Art Center working with its instructors and with its curriculum to help build those skills for designers going forward? And then I would say if anyone from an OEM wants to chime in and say, how are you guys reaching out to make sure that that gap between what you learn in school and what you're actually doing in the studio is an easier transition?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. Actually, just before we started this panel, I was telling some of our speakers about my interest in asking these questions that have to do with leadership, because last summer I piloted a class called Excellence in Leadership in Automotive Design. And it was specifically designed to address the need for our students to get some insight into really what it takes both as a designer within a larger context of a company, but also as a designer within your own department and in the field as well, about what does it take to be a leader? What are some of the skills and challenges? What are some of the best practices? And the class included students kind of researching these different models, different business models, different scale of companies, different cultures. So there's no mystery why we have such a mix of startup and legacy brands here and companies, because it varies a lot, even in the way that our students' portfolios get reviewed. Depending on who looks at them, they're either looking for somebody who they just want to be sketching, or somebody who's they won't even look at the sketches until they understand the full concept and the meaning behind the project. So I am definitely very keen in elevating that leadership perspective and kind of encouraging our students to take on positions of responsibility in many different aspects. And this is why I'm also very keen in fostering a stronger mentorship culture. We have so many studios. We're so blessed to have so many car companies around us in our neighborhood. Whether it's, actually I'm going to highlight somebody in a minute, between the legacy companies to bigger tech startups, and I'll have to highlight Sasha if you don't mind. We have in the audience with us Sasha Selipanov, who's just started his own car company, right? So the variety of yes. Quick plug. Keep your eyes on Pebble Beach this year, because you'll be seeing a fantastic vehicle that will be released by Sasha. So, and this also goes back to, just earlier that you were talking about, Derek and Ian, when we were talking about that pendulum between, the rational side of the product and the passionate side of the product, right? And I think the car that you'll be seeing from Sasha is definitely hitting off the charts on the passionate side of the product. So, yeah, it's all of that we're very much looking forward to working on deeper at Art Center. And again, building in our students a sense of responsibility and taking on the role, because, wrapping it back to designers in the design department within the company, it's my belief that designers, especially now, are really well poised to take on a driving position in the industry, okay? And I have this I all thought about using it for this panel, but I have this chart that I've developed about how throughout history, different roles were kind of taking the driving position, from the inventors in the beginning to the industrialists, like Henry Ford and Gianni Agnelli and all of that, to the engineers, to the marketing people, to the bean counters, the product planners. And it's really the designers that have never really taken that wheel, right? And yet we are equipped, because we are able to talk the language of a marketing discipline, of the engineering discipline, sales, business, all of those things, right? But they can't quite, most of them cannot quite get what we have, because it is a talent, it's a gift, it's a way of seeing. And so we are able to wear a lot of different hats, but it's very difficult for others to wear a designer's hat. And we've all seen in the industry people who have thought that they had it, but it's not quite there, right? But so I do want to encourage this next generation to really seize the opportunity that's ahead, to really drive it.
Laura, our interns, like back there, he's all
Shout
smiling.
out to Chewy.
You know, when we take our interns, we don't put them in a box. And they used to do their own project. We don't do that anymore. We throw them in the deep end, like fully immersed with the actual design team, doing a design review. I mean, he presented to my global boss, Simon Humphreys, this past week. And so the interns at our company get the full experience of what it's like to present, how to pitch your idea, how to get criticism from the global boss of design and get that feedback. And you're not treated like with kid gloves anymore. You're fully in it. And I think that learning curve comes quick that way. And then regarding designers having a lot more power, I think it's a running theme for today's conversation. Again, you think about Thomas at Polestar, you know, basically he's not the designer, he's the CEO of that company. Again, my boss, Simon Humphreys, is on the board of directors now for Toyota, Lexus. And you can see, you know, Acura, that's happened as well with Johnny Cada. So you see these things happening, and I think it's come to a realization that leadership is visionary. You know, it's not just bean counting anymore. It's like, you know, charting the course towards the future, and I think designers are well suited to that. I think when you create that course about design leadership, that's going to be another great thing for Art Center moving ahead. Because if I could get a new employee who's already really well versed on how to sell their concept and make a concept and make an idea that marketing could accept, that's basically 3 years of learning already taken care of.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, I think we'll have to wrap because we have another panel coming up by the interaction department. That will be in, sorry?
Quick question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Where does aerodynamics fall in your priority in designing a car? I'm a little biased. Sasha knows me.
Thanks. So we teach aerodynamics currently within 2 different courses. There are modules that are being taught in vehicle engineering, taught by Eric Noble, and as well as in vehicle architecture, taught by our associate chair, Alan Macy. So if you don't mind, I will have to close. So let me just, I have to make Jim, our new marketing head, happy.
Aero is important.
Extremely.
On behalf of Art Center College of Design and the 20th anniversary of our South Campus, I want to thank everyone once again for celebrating with us. And lastly, I would like to recognize the hard work and dedication of everyone involved in bringing this project to fruition. From the architects and construction teams to the City of Pasadena and to our faculty and staff, especially our facilities and planning team who have worked tirelessly on this project for many years. Maybe a shout out to Jay right now. Jay Sanders, can you please stand? We'd need another hour at least to just scratch the surface of what Jay and Stuart had to go through to make this happen. So thank you so much. We owe you so much. Thank you. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day as you explore beyond supersonic art exhibitions, art market, design invitational, and more. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.